All right, let's dive into the absolutely improbable story of a country that was never even supposed to exist. It's one of the smallest and, yep, one of the wealthiest places on the entire planet.
So, here's the central question, right? How does a place like Liechtenstein, which wasn't born from a revolution or some grand conquest, but was literally bought by a rich family for bragging rights, how does it manage to stick around through 3 centuries of pure European chaos?
To get our heads around this, we've got to travel back in time, back to an era where owning land wasn't really about building a nation, it was about buying a status symbol.
Okay, so picture this. It's the late 1600s. The House of Liechtenstein is this super powerful, super rich family. They've got land all over Central Europe. But there was one thing they didn't have, and they wanted it bad: a seat in the imperial diet. You know, the big boy club of the Holy Roman Empire. And to get in, you needed a very specific kind of real estate, land held directly from the emperor himself.
So what do? They go shopping. They find these 2 tiny, kind of remote territories that nobody really wanted, and they buy them. They fit the bill perfectly. Then in 1719, the emperor just smushes them together and says, voila, the Principality of Liechtenstein. He even named it after the family that just wrote the check.
And this quote just lays it all out, plain and simple. This whole thing wasn't about creating a homeland for a people. Nope, it was about getting a very, very expensive ticket into the most exclusive political club in Europe. The country itself was just the price of admission.
And if you need any more proof of how little they cared about the place, get this. It took 123 years for a ruling prince to even bother visiting. Can you imagine? They just ran the whole thing from their fancy palaces back in Vienna.
So the big question is, how did this real estate project accidentally turn into a real country? Well, the answer, like it is for so many things in European history, is one man, Napoleon.
So Napoleon comes along and just blows up the Holy Roman Empire in 1806. As he's redrawing the map of Europe, he kind of just shrugs and, almost as an afterthought, makes Liechtenstein a sovereign state. All of a sudden, this quiet little principality is forced to stand on its own 2 feet and act like a real country for the very first time.
Now, this new identity gets put to the test pretty quickly. During the Austro-Prussian War in 1866, Liechtenstein sides with Austria and has to send its entire army of 80 men, to go guard a mountain pass. But this is where the story becomes the stuff of legend. The 80 soldiers went, they hung out, they saw absolutely no fighting, and when the war was over, they marched back home with 81 people. Seriously, they didn't lose a single man, and they somehow made a new friend along the way. Nobody's quite sure who he was, maybe an Austrian liaison, maybe an Italian guy they just picked up. And that little adventure seems to have made something click. They realized that an army of 80 guys wasn't going to cut it in modern Europe, so they made a brilliant, practical decision. They just got rid of their army altogether. And from that point on, their survival strategy became permanent neutrality. And look, here they are. These are the actual guys from that legendary peaceful mission. This photo really captures a defining moment, the one that put the country on this totally unique path it's still on today.
All right, fast forward to the 20th century. A strategy of neutrality sounds nice, but how does it hold up when you've got 2 world wars raging all around you? Let's find out.
So, in World War I, Liechtenstein's close ties to Austria-Hungary backfired. Big time. The Allies hit them with a brutal economic embargo, and the country was basically starving. So, after the war, facing total ruin, they made an absolutely genius pivot. They ditched Austria and tied their entire future to their other neighbor, stable, neutral Switzerland. This move probably saved them.
But then came the Nazis. And just being neutral wasn't going to be enough. After Germany swallowed up Austria in 1938, tiny Liechtenstein was completely surrounded. They even had a local Nazi party pushing for a German takeover. Things got so bad, the prince himself had to go to Berlin and personally plead with Hitler to leave his country alone.
And then, in March 1939, it came to a head. The local Nazis tried to overthrow the government, but it failed. Loyal citizens actually stopped them in their tracks. The plotters begged Germany to invade, but Hitler said no, most likely because he didn't want to risk messing up his relationship with Switzerland. So it was this combination of gutsy citizens and pure geopolitics that let Liechtenstein squeak by.
Okay, so after World War II, Liechtenstein survives, but it is flat broke. The communists in Czechoslovakia and Poland had seized all the princely family's valuable estates. That was their main source of cash for centuries. The family was so hard up they had to start selling off priceless art, including a portrait by Leonardo da Vinci, just to pay the bills.
So with their backs against the wall, they had to reinvent themselves again. And they got really creative. They basically weaponized their own sovereignty. They slashed corporate taxes to almost nothing, and just like that, this poor little farming country became a magnet for international money. It was an incredible transformation into the powerhouse financial hub we know today.
Now, this brings us to one of the weirdest things about modern Liechtenstein. You'd think it would be a purely symbolic monarchy, right? Well, you'd be wrong. The prince has a shocking amount of actual power.
Get this. In 2003, while other monarchies around the world were fading into the background, the people of Liechtenstein voted to give their prince more power. He actually told them that if they didn't, he'd pack his bags and move back to Vienna. And the people overwhelmingly voted to let him stay and to give him the extra powers he wanted. Wild, right?
And we're not talking about just cutting ribbons here. The prince can fire the entire government. He appoints the judges, and he has the final say, a veto, on any law, even if it was passed by the people in a referendum. It makes him one of the most powerful monarchs in all of Europe, hands down.
So when you boil it all down, the story of Liechtenstein is just one long masterclass in survival and reinvention. It went from being an accident of imperial politics, to a clever neutral state, to a World War survivor, and finally, into this incredibly prosperous and unique modern country.
And really, it just leaves you with this amazing question. What can the story of this tiny nation teach us? How can the little guys not just survive, but actually thrive when they're surrounded by giants? Turns out, you do it by playing a completely different game.